Welcome everybody here in the Bali. Welcome to the people watching from wherever they are in the world. Welcome to this lecture series, Are Ambassadeur, in a collaboration with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today we shine a light on our man in Pretoria, who will be telling us about his work and life as the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Pretoria in South Africa. Mr. Peters is not my only guest this evening. I am joined here at the table by Anglican priest, theologian, writer and artist Mpho Tutu van Furth. Welcome, Mpho.
Thank you.
Before we dive into our conversation, I'd like to give some details about our ambassador in South Africa. He was previously ambassador in Brazil and in Afghanistan, and he's been working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs since the year 2000. And he's been in Pretoria since 2018, so that's 2 years now. Mr. Peters is not physically here with us tonight because of COVID-19, but we are in touch with him through a video connection. Your Excellency, good evening. Where are you at this moment, sir?
I'm at home in Pretoria with my wife, and happy to be here with you all in Amsterdam. I would love to have been there physically, but that's simply not possible right now.
I think we all join that sentiment, but thank you for taking the trouble to join us via this video connection. And we're very eager to hear you speak, which you will do in just a few moments. You will tell us about your work and life in Pretoria. Are you ready for that, sir?
Sure.
The floor is all yours. Han Peters.
Okay. Thank you so much. After 30 years, I'm back again in South Africa. I was in the early 90s in Pretoria, and I worked there 3 years, arriving just 6 weeks before the release of Mr. Mandela. So that was really a historic moment, and I witnessed the birth of a democratic South Africa in these early 90s. And now I'm back since August 2018. And of course, I saw a country that has changed quite a lot. But it remains a fascinating country. And it's a big honor for me to share this podium tonight with someone as remarkable as Mpho Tutu, who has a remarkable life story. And as I said, very happy to be here with you. Maybe let's start with a couple of basics. South Africa has a population of around 59 million people. It is 30 times bigger than the Netherlands. It is very culturally diverse with around 11 official languages. 79% of the population is African, 9 colored, 9% white and 3% Indian. And the per capita income is about 1/4 of that of the Netherlands. I've been working now as a diplomat for more than 30 years. And it has always been difficult to explain to others what, in fact, a diplomat does. But when I became Director of Consular Affairs 10 years ago, I could finally explain to my mother what I was really doing, because in that function, I was helping Dutch people abroad. And basically, that is still what my team and I are trying to do here in South Africa, every day, to try to help Dutch people, Dutch companies, Dutch NGOs. And we're trying to advance Dutch interests, but of course also with the sharp eye to the needs of South Africa. And this took a very concrete form over the past couple of months, when of course also we were struck by the pandemic and sudden lockdown. And suddenly all international flights were impossible. They could only be organized by embassies with, of course, the help of airline companies. And together with KLM, our team in Pretoria and Cape Town organized more than 40 flights, giving around 10,000 people a chance to go back home, both Dutch people, EU citizens, but also many South Africans. And maybe that has been for me one of the most concrete forms of assisting both Dutch citizens and Dutch business. But we do more, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Climate change is, of course, on everyone's mind nowadays, and according to scientific estimates, the Southern Africa region is going to be hit double hard the temperatures are supposed to be rising twice as fast as in the rest of the world. And after 5 months of no travel, I made last week with my wife a road trip to the Northern Cape, which Mpho for sure will know. And it's a barren region. It's dry, it's arid, but it also has an amazing amount of flowers, especially in the springtime. And as we were enjoying the beauty of these flowers in Namakwaland, I was thinking of the impact of climate change. And will this region in 10 years' time from now maybe undergo the same fate as the coral reefs, which used to be very colorful natural wonders, and many of them are now simply have turned gray. So South Africa is really facing a huge climate change, but not with the luxury that we have in the Netherlands, with at least a good economy. South Africa has, of course, huge challenges when it comes to poverty, inequality. It's one of the most unequal countries in the world. So it's not an easy task for South Africa. But what we are trying to do is to help assist in the just green transition. Many people are still working in the mines, and we are currently trying to find out whether we can do a pilot in which we see if there are alternative jobs available in, for instance, agriculture or in renewables. Another issue that I would like to touch upon, and that's the last one I will mention now, is, of course, our history. Netherlands is known, on the one hand, of course, as the country of Jan van Riebeeck. And if you are in Cape Town, you can see the splendor of the fort built by the Dutch East India Company. But you can also, a couple of streets further on, visit the Slave Lodge, which shows you another face of the VOC, namely its involvement in slave trade. So for some South Africans, we are the first colonizers of South Africa. Some people say that we stood at the cradle of apartheid. For others, we are known for our struggle against the apartheid, especially in the 70s and the 80s. And it's these two sides of the medal that make working here very interesting. And we are engaging in dialogues with South Africans about our past, our story, but also about their story. And dialogues in which there's room for more than just one perspective. And it's also interesting to see that also in the Netherlands now we are looking again at our history, at our involvement in slavery. I will leave it at that. I'll be happy to, of course, touch upon many more issues, but for the time being, I will go back to you, Albert.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Peters. We will join you. We will ask you to join the rest of this conversation in a short while, and we will certainly be touching on some of the subjects that you have now spoken of. But first, if you will let me, I'd like to get acquainted with my other guest, Mpho Tutu van Furth. Welcome, Mpho, again. Just a couple of questions to scratch the surface so we know who you are. At the risk of being stale, you are the daughter of Desmond and Leah Tutu, and you grew up in South Africa. What, if anything, struck you most in what Ambassador Peters just told us? Could you put
yes.
the mic to you? Thank you.
I would say maybe the thing that was most striking and very helpfully so was to recognize that the role of the Netherlands in South Africa is at the very least complicated. And so I'm very grateful that you have acknowledged that that challenge and that complication and the sense that the history of the Netherlands with South Africa goes back many centuries, not just many decades. And I think on the other hand is, as you spoke to the impact of climate change and the impact that climate change is going to have on South Africa, and what are the resources, not only financial, but also intellectual and experiential, that the Netherlands can bring to bear on South Africa as it considers its climate future.
and under which conditions, I might add.
Yes.
Yes. You've been living in the Netherlands for some while now.
Yes.
What would you say is the biggest difference between living here or living there?
For me, the biggest difference is the Netherlands is very organized. Everything is on a schedule, and you always know what's going to happen next, or more or less. And if you bump into your best friend in the mall, which you don't go to now because of COVID, but if you bump into your best friend in the mall, you don't say, let's go and grab a cup of coffee and have a conversation. You whip out your diary and say, next week, Thursday at 2:00,
oh, that's
we
early
should
even.
get together and have
right.
a cup of coffee. And I think, South Africa is a little bit more, you don't know what's going to happen next, a little bit more spontaneous. And I think that that's maybe one of the most striking features to me.
Yeah. Is that what you miss most, the spontaneity?
Yes. I think, the thing that I would say for myself, that I will know that I have a real friend in the Netherlands when there is somebody who I can drop in on unannounced. And then that will be, I want to have one drop-in friend.
I think
that doesn't happen.
It's not going to happen.
Well, there's a lot of buitenlanders.
Well, it will probably end up that you turn more Dutch than you were, and suddenly start whipping out your own calendar. Let's talk about the number one current situation in the world at this moment, the pandemic. Mr. Peters, the impact of COVID-19 at the moment in South Africa, how would you describe it?
Well, South Africa was very quick with introducing a very strict lockdown. And that meant, for instance, that many shops were closed. People were not allowed to travel. There was a curfew. You couldn't go to liquor stores. You couldn't have gatherings.
Yeah, no alcohol at all. I think I read somewhere. Is that true?
Yeah, for some time there was because the idea was that if people use alcohol, that can lead to an increase in demand for health services, accidents and things like that. So the government said, we don't want to overburden the health sector by having this category as well. Then the rise in the number of victims of contaminations was very slow, but we had a peak in August. But still, we have never seen what we saw, for instance, in March in Italy, people dying in the corridors of hospitals. And now we are beyond the peak, and we are going back slowly to normalcy. But the impact on the economy is huge. The South African economy has contracted by 50%, 50.
Yes, 51 actually, today, compared to 8.5 in the Netherlands. So that's huge.
Yeah, and of course, many people are not part of the formal economy. Many people have informal jobs, and for them, no work means no income, no food. So the impact, I think, health-wise, is manageable, but the impact on the economy and on poverty is huge and will be around for quite some time, I'm afraid.
And what can you tell us about the numbers, the horrific numbers that we share all day, number of deaths, number of cases even? How is that there?
Well, the number of deaths is, if you compare it to the population, is comparable to the Netherlands. We were in July and August, the numbers were increasing really fast, but the number of deaths has been, not so bad, I can say. Maybe due to the fact that South Africa has a very young population, so 50% of the young generation is under 25, so that may be an explanation. And the recovery rate is more than 90%.
90?
90.
Yeah.
So the impact has been huge, but I think, as I said, manageable in health terms, much more difficult in economic terms.
Okay, we'll talk about economics in a little bit. Mpho, when was the last time you visited South Africa?
March, just right before the lockdown.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not as long ago as I might have thought. How would you normally spend your year? Would you be traveling to and fro, or are you at this moment inhibited to travel to South Africa because of COVID?
Definitely, yeah. I think I'm not back and forth as often as I'd like. Once a week would be fine by me.
Spend the weekends in South Africa with a partner. Yeah.
But but COVID has definitely inhibited my travel to South Africa and even my prospective travel to South Africa.
So no plans for the foreseeable future to go back?
No plans, but definite hopes.
Definite hopes. Don't we all have that? Yeah. Mr. Peters, we've been hearing about the corruption situation in South Africa, where it concerns the money that was allocated by the president, Mr. Ramaphosa, to combat the corona crisis. It turns out that a lot of it has disappeared into deep pockets, if I may say so. Any news on that? Any updates that we might be interested in?
Yeah, I think that corruption, unfortunately, is part and parcel of daily life. I think what really caused a lot of indignation among South Africans was that even with the tenders that were issued for protecting the people, which were related to COVID, that they were abused, and then some people took advantage of that. The president then wrote unprecedentedly a letter to the members of the ANC saying that the ANC needs to do better in that respect. He even said that the ANC is accused number one. That's, of course, a very bold statement for a political leader. There's, of course, in the ANC a huge discussion as to whether he was exaggerating or not, but I think that he is putting the finger on the
sore spot. Yeah,
it is really something that the country has to come to grips with.
Yeah.
Last year, he nominated a new director of the public prosecutor. And they are busy preparing cases, and I think that everyone is waiting for the first people to appear before a judge.
So we know who are the culprits. We know where to look for them.
Well, there are many names being mentioned.
Yeah.
I think the problem, as always, with the public prosecution is that you want to have a case which is solid. What they don't want to have is that they with a lot of fanfare, they bring someone before the judge, and then the case is not strong enough to get to a conviction. But also the National Prosecuting Authority also was riddled with people that were not qualified. So it's a huge task. I think President Ramaphosa is doing his very best to do what needs to be done, but people are getting impatient.
Okay, so and what can you say about the judicial system in South Africa? Is that reliable, or is there corruption going on there as well?
I think the judicial system is reliable, is a strong factor. Luckily, has not been affected as much over the past 10 years. So I think that's one of the strong points of South Africa, that the judiciary is reliable, they are professional, and hopefully they will get the tools to serve justice.
Yeah. Are you in any way optimistic on this topic, Mpho?
Hopeful. I think that Ramaphosa's inclinations seem to be in the right direction. However, we have lived through a Zuma presidency in which there was rampant corruption. And we inherited a civil service where people were grandfathered in from the apartheid administration. And so, it's not, it's not that we got, here is the end of apartheid, now the slate is clean and we have, now the good guys come in. We're working with what we have.
Yes, and you're working with old systems, like you say. So what do you think it is that modern day South Africa would need to lift it to that next level?
Well, I think that it is very much a leadership, an issue of a leadership that we can believe in, which I think in part in Ramaphosa that we do have. But I also think that we need a piece of creative imagination that says that the investment isn't just an investment to be made at the level of government. We never talked at the end of apartheid about how about the economic system in South Africa and how deliberately and over centuries the economic system had disadvantaged the black population. And that in order to get South Africa into the status that is not ripe for corruption, when you have the kind of wealth divisions that you have in South Africa, that is absolutely a situation
because that hasn't actually changed.
That has not changed, and so of course it's ripe for corruption.
Yeah.
And if you see yourself if you're standing guard over the till and you look back over your shoulder and it's like, okay, well, my mom lives in a hovel, but now I have a government position where I have access to whatever it is that I have access to. Mm-hmm. It takes an incredible amount of integrity to say, I'm not going to stick my finger in there. Mm-hmm. And especially when you look around at your fellow civil servants who over decades have been able to build up wealth for themselves, and that you're only now coming in to have that chance. So it's not that I'm justifying the corruption, but I am saying that all of us must be held to account for that corruption. Not only the people who play it out, in front of our eyes, but the system that creates. I mean, the system is already corrupt. It's already poisonous in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And so this is just another layer of corruption in a different flavor that is not palatable to the world community. But the system is corrupt.
Yeah.
It's,
So you mentioned what is needed is creative ways of looking at it. What do you suggest?
Well, I mean, some of the creative ways of looking at it are perhaps a wealth tax that says, when I look at, here is the wealth that I have acquired over decades and centuries because I had these advantages. Maybe if I place that investment into bringing the country into something that looks a little bit more equal. I mean, one of the reasons that one of the things that I didn't mention about loving being in the Netherlands is the sense of safety. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons for that sense of safety is that there isn't a huge difference between the resources that the poorest people in the country have and the resources that the wealthiest people in the country have. There's kind of a bottom below which most people will not fall. Right. In South Africa, that's not the case. The bottom is way, way, way down. It's kind of in the Mariana Trench. Yeah. And the top is somewhere near halfway up Mount Everest. And so when you have that kind of wealth disparity, of course you have corruption.
Yes.
So, thinking about here in the Netherlands, taxes are high.
They are very high, but we got a lot from them. Let's not say this too loudly.
No, taxes are high, but I don't feel the same sense of resentment about paying taxes in the Netherlands, because I look around and I'm like, okay, the trains run, the streets
not on time, but they run. Yes.
Okay. Well, I bike, so what am I going to say? But you can look and you can say, okay, I see where this tax money is working. Taxes in South Africa are also quite high. But you look around and you can't see
what are
the, at least when you pull, so this view of Cape Town, gorgeous view of Cape Town, City Bowl, it's probably from about the beach near my house. But actually, the vast majority of the Cape Town population lives when you pull back further and you get into the Cape Flats and you get into those areas of abject poverty, and it's not so pretty.
So this was taken by some rich white South African, the picture?
Oh no, I would have taken this picture. It's much prettier than than that picture that you pull out from. But I have no idea who took that picture. It's a gorgeous picture.
It is, yeah.
But the reality is that is the reality for very few South Africans.
Understand. Mr. Peters, this disparity that Mpho is talking about, the disparity in income, can you explain what the results of that disparity are in this time of corona crisis? Can you explain what the differences are?
Yeah, as Mpho was saying, the differences are huge, and the differences are also still very much racially defined. So you will see that most of the white people are still well off, and most of the black people are still poor. And I think we talked about corruption. People, after 25 years of democracy, are feeling that they have not been able to profit enough from 25 years of democracy. The political transition that took place was not followed by an economic transition. That also means that, for instance, the crime rates are very high. In South Africa, 21,000 murders take place every year, and I think in the Netherlands it's something like 145. And I fully agree with Mpho, that has a lot to do also with inequality.
Yeah. Well, why wasn't that tackled at the same time? The reconciliation talks that took place when apartheid was abolished. Why wasn't the economic aspect of it taken into account in those talks, do you think?
I think what Mr. Mandela has done was remarkable. But also maybe he saw what was possible and what was not possible.
So he chose his battles.
Well, for instance, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a great thing. I also at the time was very impressed by the way that South Africa handled that. If you look at how difficult for us it was to come to terms with the Second World War and our relation with Germany. But many young people feel that it stopped too early. With my wife, I had a lunch in Soweto before the COVID, and we had a discussion with young people, and one young girl said, well, Rainbow Nation up my ass, This Rainbow Nation was suddenly declared, but the Rainbow Nation does not exist. And I think that many people are frustrated. And for me, there's no silver bullet, but I think for me, what is very important is to try to work on improving education. I think education is key for everything. Unfortunately, you have to work and to wait a long time before you see the results, because too many young people don't have the right education and therefore find it very difficult to have jobs. And also, solidarity is also, I think, needed. But on the other hand, many people who are having a decent life in South Africa think that they already are paying enough taxes. So that's also not a resource that you can tap endlessly.
Well, maybe, like Mpho say, it should be a wealth tax. They can miss some money.
Yeah.
Or a one-time wealth tax.
A one-time wealth tax. Oh, that's an idea. Yeah. Well, something to think about. You're actually taking us to our second topic, Mr. Peters, diplomacy. Let me start with you, Mpho. How would you describe the current relationship between South Africa and the Netherlands?
I'm not a diplomat.
No, that's why I'm asking you. I know what he's going to say, so what do you think of it?
Well, I think the relationship, the current relationship between South Africa and the Netherlands, I think is good. We have, or South Africa has benefited from good consular staff, good ambassadorial staff over the post-apartheid era, and who have an eye both to good for business for the Netherlands, and maybe also with a sense of our checkered history.
That's exactly why I'm asking, because is it enough for you personally?
Well, see, the thing is that when you ask the relationship question at a governmental level, there's and a diplomatic level, there is that thing that goes on, and then at the interpersonal and humane level, there are other things that happen.
Like what?
Oh. Like love.
All right, like love.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
But also that there are a lot of young people who come over, who are invested in education in South Africa, who are engaged in projects in South Africa, who fall in love with the country of South Africa and really want to invest time and energy and intellectual resources there. And in that way, that relationship is good. And before COVID, there was, of course, a significant tourist population that was coming to South Africa. I mean, the KLM flight to Cape Town was always
non-stop.
Yeah,
yes.
It was always full, and those weren't South Africans sitting in those seats.
No, okay. Yeah. Mr. Peters, how would you describe the current relations between the two countries?
Well, of course, they are great.
Of course they are, sir. Of course they are.
But no, I think there are. When I worked in South Africa 30 years ago, it was interesting to see, of course, that then our parliament was very much busy with the struggle against apartheid. And now we see in parliament discussions about farm murders. That's a quite different perspective. I find that interesting. As far as the economic and investment relationship is concerned, I think the Netherlands is still one of the biggest investors in South Africa. 70% of the citrus fruits that are produced in South Africa come to the Netherlands.
70% of, sorry, what did you say?
70%.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
And for some reason, we like the South African avocados a lot because we buy a lot of them. Interpersonal relations are, in that sense, intensive that we have 150,000 Dutch people who visit South Africa every year. And many of them come here during our winter to enjoy the South African sun.
Yeah.
I think as far as politics is concerned, over the past 10 years, especially under President Zuma, we have seen South Africa quite often supporting the Russian and Chinese viewpoints. I think now there's a willingness to broaden a little bit the horizons. And I think what is a real challenge is that South Africa and Europe are trying to work better with each other. EU is still the biggest investor in South Africa. The EU is still the biggest trade partner. But somehow many South Africans think that China is the most important trade partner, which is not true. So I think there lies a challenge for both of us to see how we can improve also our dialogue on political matters.
Yeah. But if you allow me to tease you just a little bit, because that's my role here. For some reason, I can kind of understand that a country like South Africa might want to look at China and other countries before going back to Europe to do business because of that history.
Yeah.
How can we be sure that whatever is invested by Europe in these former colonies is for the benefit of those colonies and not just to make the Netherlands even richer than it is? Just teasing you, but try to answer me, please.
No, of course. It's a good question. I think we can really say that the role of colonizer that many European countries had, and in South Africa, of course, especially the Dutch and the Brits, that's not the way we work anymore.
Oh, I hope not. Yes.
I really can say if you look at multinationals that are working in South Africa, I think corporate social responsibility is not just a publicity slogan anymore. I think that's true.
But I mean, they're not just there or wherever they are in the world because they want to help out those places. They are there to make a lot of money, which they do. So I'm asking, what is most important in
Well, but making money is a bit of a one-sided view. Of course, in economies, companies in the Netherlands are also interested in making money, but not only in making money.
No.
And these European companies also create a lot of jobs in South Africa. But there's another aspect which is important in our relationship. That is, South Africa has a very progressive constitution. It is a country where same-sex marriage is allowed, where the president makes a real point of fighting gender-based violence. And it's these, I think, democratic principles where I feel that we have a lot to offer to each other in a world where it's becoming more and more difficult to defend these principles. So the challenge for us is, I think, to try to broaden that relationship and to include even more that aspect, because South Africa is really a partner when it comes to human rights, when it comes to rights of people that are minorities. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot we can do together, I think. Okay,
and thank you for that, because you're taking me to the next point in this talk, Mr. Peters, human rights, LGBT rights. As Mr. Peters has specified, same-sex marriage is legal in South Africa, and there's no problem with that. But it's been broadly documented, Mpho, that your marriage in 2015 to your Dutch wife sitting behind me has greatly impacted your life, and not all of it in the happy spectrum, because as a result of your marriage, you were forced to relinquish priesthood in South Africa's Anglican Church. Your diocese simply revoked your license. How can we rhyme these two things? South Africa being on the forefront of human rights, as Mr. Peters tells us, and you actually being forced to uproot.
So, as Ambassador Peters stated, South Africa has an amazing, progressive, exemplary constitution. That's what we have on paper, and the task is taking what is on paper and making that into the lived experience of people on the ground. And that is where we are challenged. So it's not, my having my license revoked, as painful as that was for me personally, was an emotional pain, and I will get over it. I can figure out how to manage a life without having a license in a diocese in which I no longer live. But the reality is that there are still LGBTQIA plus people in communities all over South Africa who face violence for their sexual identity, for their gender identity, for how it is that they present themselves. So that is, it's great. It is there on paper. And if you live long enough to get it to court, the courts will protect you. But it hasn't yet filtered all the way through the society that this is the right that is enshrined.
So could you walk hand in hand with your wife in the streets of Pretoria in this case?
Depends on where in the streets of Pretoria I'm walking. But I mean, that's also true here.
Definitely.
It's not, that's not, it's not a thing that is so foreign. What the law allows and what people's lived experiences are always have to catch up with each other. We're not unique in that way. And the dedication to human rights is admirable. But the task is always, how do we get this thing off the paper and into people's lives?
Yes. Your father, the Archbishop, he stated that he could never love a homophobic God. That must have made you feel good when he said that.
Oh, he's yes.
What?
No, I mean, that was something that was so far back in his history.
It wasn't because of this situation that he said that.
Absolutely not.
I understand. Okay.
No,
I
mean, he's so far ahead of the curve.
Isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes. So, but we
taught him well.
And he was able to give you, his father's blessing for your wedding, but not. He couldn't bless your union as a priest. Is that something you would have wanted him to be able to do?
Yes, of course.
So how did you get around that?
Well, we had a small private ceremony in our hotel room on the morning of our celebration, and he, and he preached for us, and he blessed us, and yeah,
that's beautiful.
But that, it wasn't for public consumption. It wasn't a challenge to anybody. This is where his
private.
Heart is.
Yes. Yeah. He passed on to you the calling, I suppose I could say. I wonder how that must make you feel if you do have this calling to be a priest and you've done the work to become one, and you are in the place where you want to preach and you can't. What does that do to a person? It's not as if you decide on a Tuesday that you'll be a priest on a Wednesday. It takes planning, it takes work, like I said, and then you can't do the work.
Yeah, it's it's also a vocation. It's not kind of an optional extra. So a job is what you do. Yes. A vocation is who you are.
That's
who you're called to be.
That's what I mean. To you, it's a calling.
Right, and so just acknowledging to myself that this is, South Africa is not the place where I am going to live out this calling at this moment in time. But the church makes decisions that the church makes, and God makes decisions that God makes. And God will in the fullness of time, make things right.
That's the strong belief you have.
Yes.
Yes, and well, I suppose it
Otherwise, it would be a waste of time to believe in God.
That's a very valid point. I'd like to take you through the ironical fact that it's the same Western countries who put these anti-gay laws into the Anglican Church in South Africa. Mm-hmm. They are the same ones now pointing a finger and saying, "Yo, people, we're past that." I find that ironical.
Well, no, the English aren't really past that at all. The English are very challenged by human sexuality and how human sexuality is expressed, and the English Church has tied itself in all kinds of knots around issues of human sexuality.
So what goes on in South Africa is going on in Britain
yes.
as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the law can say this is how we do it, and the church can decide otherwise?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of the sense in South African law that the church is like a club, and if the rules of your club pertain to all the members of your club in the same way, then the state will not challenge the rules of your club. I haven't quite figured that out, but fortunately I'm not a lawyer and I don't have to do that. And
it's an excuse to keep things the way they are from my standpoint. Yeah. Mr. Peters, Mpho did already touch on that. In the Netherlands, we strongly commend ourselves on being open-minded and accepting of all things LGBTQIA+. I'm sure I can't ask you the question about the hypocrisy that I just asked Mpho, but I would like to ask you, do you try to bring this across in South Africa? And if so, how?
Yeah. I very much believe that if you make yourself vulnerable, if you open yourself up to the other, that helps to have a real dialogue. I don't think that slick campaigns saying that how good you are going to help you. And that's also what, for instance, we're trying to do with our history in South Africa. We had our colleagues in Cape Town, for instance, organized a dinner and asked young South Africans, what should we do about our slave history? And then they told us, well, the best thing you can do is to shut up and to listen. Don't try to tell now again another story about how you're looking back at your history with maybe regret or whatever. Listen to us, take us seriously. And I really believe that if you try to be authentic, if you try to be honest, also saying where you have your own doubts about whether the things you're doing are good or not, I think that's the way to go. We need to try to understand each other better before we judge, and I think that's very important.
But you know as well as I do, Mr. Peters, with all respect, that we Dutch, we don't actually, we like to think we are right. And we like to tell other people to change their minds so they think the way that we do. So have people in South Africa or any of the countries where you've been a diplomat, have they told you to shut up and listen, as you said?
Well, not in the same words.
No, of course not. But
that you don't do. But of course, yes. I remember that, for instance, in Brazil, we had a discussion about looking at Dutch historical buildings. And they said, well, we're not interested in your colonial past. We have our own preferences. So, but I think it's important to try to create an environment in which people can say that. Because I think as soon as you get to that level, there can be a real dialogue.
So how can you do that as a diplomat? How can you make the circumstances right for people to feel free to tell you what they think about a subject, and for you to be able to listen to what they are saying? How can you as a diplomat create that atmosphere?
Yeah, to tell about your own, why you think that you could also do better. For instance, climate change. The Netherlands is not exactly the leader when it comes to renewables in Europe. Mm-hmm. This has a history. We had natural gas, which helped us along a long way. But it is a fact that we are not the best pupil in the class when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. Well, so we can say to South Africans, we are also grappling with the transition. Of course, the situation is different. We have to get off the gas much faster than we ever thought. Why? Because people in Groningen said, we don't want this anymore. And basically forced government, society to change course. Mm-hmm. So admitting that you also not know everything, yet you're open to learn from others and not to be patronizing, because if you are that, then you are indeed the white colonial that comes to tell the mm-hmm. South Africans what they need to do. And mm-hmm. I think that time has passed.
That time has passed. And in this specific case, the case of LGBT rights, what are the obstacles that you encounter when you broach the subject?
I think with the government, there are no obstacles simply because South Africa is adhering to this principle. It is in the constitution.
On paper, like Mpho tells us, but not so much in practice.
Yeah, no, but let's say with many other governments, you have to start a conversation about whether indeed people have the right to live the life that they want to live and to love the person that they want to love. Mm-hmm. So that's not the problem here, but indeed, in practice, it's another thing. It has a lot to do, of course, with culture. In society here, many men feel and think that they are really the head of the family and that people should do whatever they want. But it's not so different from the Netherlands maybe 40 years ago. I remember in the city where I grew up, that to tell others that you were gay was not something that you would do. Now, 40 years later, it's something that luckily more people can do, but in the past it was not easy. When my father had a butcher shop and he had to work hard, but on Sunday he was the first to get his food when we had our meal. That was the tradition in that time.
It's like so that advertisement. He was the person coming to cut the meat on Sunday.
Well, I didn't cut it. My mother cut it for me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I think that what we can do is to try to help and support NGOs, civil society movements that are active in the field of gender-based violence, of equal rights for everyone. Mm-hmm. But you always have to respect and try to understand the context in which you're working. Otherwise, you will not be efficient.
Okay. Mpho, how would you describe the Dutch approach to different subjects, colonialism, racism, human rights, LGBT rights? Where? Is that your question? Mm-hmm. Why are you asking me where?
Well, I mean, I think as the Ambassador expresses, you have to, you have a sense of the cultural context within which you operate. So are you talking about the approach at home or the approach away from home?
Away from home.
Away from home in the South African context?
No, in the Netherlands, I'm asking you.
Oh, you mean the Dutch approach in the Netherlands?
Yes, to all
of these issues? I think there's a veneer, a layer that is incredibly progressive, very non-racist, non-sexist, non-genderist, non-homophobic, the whole...
Mm-hmm. The tolerant word, which I personally don't like.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So all of that is very present on a layer on top. But I think that there are a lot of incongruities. So I think, kind of the longer you sit around the more you start to run into the fact that the moderate profile is maybe not the full description. Moderate progressive
you
profile
could enter
is not
diplomacy right away the way you're saying this. Be more specific, woman. Tell me what you mean.
Oh, well, no, but I mean, as a for instance, that, very tolerant of LGBTQIA plus rights. On the other hand, you have couples getting beaten up because they're walking hand in hand. And I don't mean 10 years ago either. I mean,
yesterday, yes.
In the very recent past and here in this country that happens. That it is a country where you see women in positions of power, but the women who you see in positions of power are not so numerous that you're like, okay, well, yeah, it's kind of 50-50. It's like, okay, well, she's there and there's her and there, but you can walk into I went with my wife to go and listen to somebody defending their PhD in a room in, I don't know what university, I can't remember.
Auditorium.
But it wasn't a huge auditorium, it was a room. But it was kind of, every white man since the 16th century marching
on the
walls, not a woman in sight. And it's like, okay, the message that gets telegraphed. I mean, I sit there, I look, I'm like, okay, you don't belong here. This is the message that is telegraphed is that this place is not for you. And that women don't challenge that they don't look around and say, now wait a minute, how many years further on are we, and why is there not a single woman in the images that we're seeing on these walls? Because it's not like we haven't done anything in the past 40 years or discovered anything or written anything.
Right.
In an academic setting.
So what does this layer of veneer tell you? What does it say about us here?
Yeah, well, the aspiration is there, like the desire
and the belief that it is real.
Right, the aspiration is there, and we think we've arrived, but we haven't, and it's that sense of. Maybe it's kind of being the child of activists that I'm like, maybe we can push this envelope just a little further. Maybe we can start claiming some of the things that we deserve for all of the work that we've put in.
Yeah, I understand what you say. Mr. Peters, when we talk about these things, I wonder how difficult it is for a diplomat as yourself to come from this country where we, like Mpho says, we think and we aspire to have all this in place and working perfectly, but in fact, it doesn't. How can we then go out into the world as an ambassador, as a diplomat, and help people along with this same subject when we don't have it done, we don't have it the way it should be yet ourselves? How can we be teachers?
I think you can be a teacher even if you don't know 100% of the stuff that you. No teacher in the world, however bright he or she may be, can ever think that he or she knows everything about the subject. But I think what you can do is the experience that you have and what you think are worthwhile sharing, to share them. But every time with a sense of whom am I talking to? What is the environment there? And does this approach work in that country? And the first thing is, of course, is show respect. But I think there's nothing wrong with also sharing your convictions.
But how deep are those convictions? If we are still, we still cover very basic things in our own society with this little layer of veneer. How deep are the convictions, I wonder?
I think, as Mpho was saying, as long as we aspire, that is a good thing to do. Because if you have to wait until we are 100% perfect, then there's not going to be not going to happen anything. You have to aspire. You have to think at least that, okay, we're not perfect, but this is what we like to do, and we like to see that happening in other countries as well. And as long as you do that with respect, and also know that you cannot simply transplant an idea or a concept from one country to the other. The other way around, there's a lot we can learn from other countries, both in Brazil and South Africa. The concept of an old age home is alien.
Exactly. So that's
no
something. No
Brazilian or South Africa would ever put grandma in an old age home.
No, so that's something you could bring back to the Netherlands when you do come back. Time is running fast, and Mpho, I want to talk to you still about. You and your wife are both dedicated to stimulating and empowering young women and to make them part of the women's rights movement. You call it your I Too network. Can you tell us about that, please?
What we say is that you'll remember there has been the hashtag Me Too, and that Me Too demonstrated that there was a huge problem that many women had confronted. There's a devastating lack of respect for women and their bodily integrity. And when women came together, that they have been able to challenge that lack of respect around the world and in the highest places. And what we say is that that I Too brings women together as mentors to mentor one another. And if each woman who is in an advanced place in her career will say, I too am willing to mentor another woman, that we can really make a significant change in the world. Studies have shown that the people who advance most rapidly in their careers, the ones who are most likely to stay on a career path, the ones who experience the most job satisfaction, are those who have been mentored. Studies also show that the people most likely to be mentored are white men, and those
the old boys network, as we call it.
Yes, and those least likely to be mentored are women of color. But women in any configuration are least likely to be mentored, and that's not necessarily a malicious decision, but it is a reality, and women typically don't mentor other women. Not because they don't want to, not because they kind of close the door in each other's faces, but for several reasons. Number one, women tend to think they need a credential to do anything. You know, I have to have the certificate. And what we say to women is that your professional experience is your certificate.
Yeah.
That is your credential, and that is the basis on which you're going to be able to mentor somebody else. And then women often, as they say, work the second shift. So they have very often the primary responsibilities for childcare and homemaking, as well as their career responsibilities. And so where a man might call a mentee at lunch break and say, let's just go and take a walk and have a sandwich and we can talk about whatever that was that we wanted to talk about. A woman would say, great, I have my lunch break, I can go and pick up the groceries, and then I can do the laundry and pick up the dry cleaning.
Yes.
And so, no, I don't actually have time to talk with you now. And so what we're creating is an online platform so that you can, and COVID is, of course, an ideal time for this, but so that a mentor and a mentee can be matched by our algorithm, and that they then connect online. That you can send your mentor a text with a question,
and this can be globally.
And this can be globally, yes, and that you can chat. When the kids are in bed and you're sitting in your pajamas with your mug of hot chocolate or glass of wine,
and the laundry running in the background.
The laundry running in the background, yes. But that you have the opportunity to help somebody else in their career, because we do derive satisfaction from sharing our knowledge and our skill.
So what would be the main thing that women should be teaching each other? I mean, people who have already reached a certain point in life, what can they teach next generations so they don't make the same mistakes that we did because we had no mentors? What's the primary thing?
Well, I think maybe just that find a mentor and be willing to be a mentor.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's wonderful. I think you should count me in.
Yay, thank you.
Yes, I said it now. Everybody saw it. Mr. Peters, women in South Africa, I'm sure, as in many countries of the sort, they play a huge role, are underpaid, undervalued, underestimated, under whatever. What are you, as a diplomat, doing for specifically women in South Africa?
Yeah. One thing I would like to mention is that we are supporting an initiative that was initiated in the Netherlands, which is called Inspiring 50. And the basic aim of that group is to unite women who work in the field of science and technology, very much still a male world. And they come together. So in South Africa, we, for instance, support them in their annual awards, in which they choose their best people, but they're also very much connecting to each other, mentoring each other, and making sure that if you have a panel on a subject which some people think is something for men, that you invite that female expert and that you do the extra mile to get this female expert. Yeah. So that's one important thing. Also in South Africa, women are, as you said, getting less money, are doing more work, and quite often are bypassed simply because, no one thought about it.
Yeah.
And of course, in our human rights program, we also have a special focus for things that have to do with women, equality, things like that. But I think, especially in science and technology, the fourth industrial revolution is coming.
And the women are leading it, because I think there's more women studying.
And we need really to get many more girls involved in that sector. Mm-hmm. Also very much a cultural thing, I think.
Yeah, but I think practice will change culture in the end, won't it, on this topic?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Mpho, is there anything you would like to tell Mr. Peters that might be useful for him in the coming period in Pretoria? and please feel free to talk. He's also free to deny, but.
Yeah. Oh no, I wouldn't ever think to tell you how to do your job. You have all of these years of experience, and I'm thankful that you're there. I've enjoyed our conversation this evening.
Okay.
And how about you, Your Excellency? Any last words that you would like to add before we give the room the opportunity to ask a couple of questions? Anything that is left unspoken of tonight?
Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think what is really important that, as I said before, that we try to also put our own position to the discussion, and not to be too confident that what we are saying is right. I think the COVID crisis shows us that we all learning by doing. No one has yet found the best approach to handle things. In South Africa, people are wearing masks. I believe in the Netherlands that's not happening.
Oh, don't even talk about that.
We don't know. And
a little
if you bring more sides to the, if you bring more sides to the table, that results in more diversity, more creativity, and that's the only way to solve current day's problems. And not if you only reading your own books and singing your own songs.
A little humility is what you're saying, actually, isn't it?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Thank you so very much, both of you. I would like to give the room the opportunity to ask questions to my two guests. If you have anything or a comment, please raise your hand and the 1.5 meter microphone will come your way. Yes, there's one right here, Sophie. Thank you for being the first. You know that we always need a first. Thank you.
I will try not to beat you with this.
No problem. Who's your question to Mpho or to the ambassador?
I think it's to Ambassador Peters, but possibly to both of you.
Yeah.
My name is Lloyd. I also am a South African living outside of South Africa. So if you ever need a drop-in buddy, think of me.
Thank you.
I have many friends, Dutch friends, who continually are taking trips to South Africa to go and see Cape Town, and possibly to Ambassador Peters. What would you like Dutch people who come on holiday to South Africa to see or to know or to learn about South Africa outside of just, I guess, Camps Bay Beach and the Stellenbosch wine region?
Wonderful. That's a very practical question. Thank you.
Yeah. I think the same thing is the same advice that you could give to foreigners coming to the Netherlands, that there's more to the Netherlands than just Amsterdam. What I particularly like are the areas where you have vast spaces, sparsely populated, wide views, beautiful skies. It takes some effort because you have to drive many kilometers to get there.
But the road is fine too.
Sorry?
The road to a nice place is fun as well.
The Karoo, Northern Cape, as we've just done, and maybe also try to look beyond the stereotypes. Try maybe to see how you can visit townships without being a spectator who's looking at people who live in poverty. But there are many initiatives in townships that try to get tourists to the townships to show them what life is like, how people live, and it's not just showing poverty and a lot of other things. So try to look beyond these things, and you'll discover an even more beautiful and diverse South Africa, I think.
Yes, so try to discover the many layers of South Africa, because there are so many. Thank you. Anybody else with a comment or a question? Behind me? Right here, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Arne Doornbal. Actually, I have a question to Mpho. We previously talked about the economic inequalities and your views about how to address that. We didn't talk about the land issue yet. How would you tackle the issue that most land is still in the hands of the white minority? Do you believe in the Julius Malema way, the Mugabe way, or are there other ways to get a more equal division of land?
Oh, you're broaching a topic now, but if you can...
Why didn't I get that question? Can you trade?
Because you're working here today. That's why. But can you give some... because it's a whole new evening, what he's asking. It's a great question, though, but a general answer. Is there a general answer?
Yeah, there isn't a general answer. And if there was an easy general answer, we'd have got there by now. But the Mugabe way was cynical, actually. That in the sense that that Zimbabwe didn't tackle the land issue early, and when they finally decided that, okay, now we're going to tackle the land issue, that decision was in a way opportunistic on the part of Mugabe that I am going to buy votes by handing over land without any sense of fairness, proportionality, any taking into account the realities of the country that we're in. So don't want that one. The Malema option is another flavor of opportunism. Malema is oh, he's Malema. And we'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay.
But the real challenge is that it does have to be part of a comprehensive conversation. We're not going to throw white people into the sea. We'd already decided that piece had already been decided.
Okay. That's a relief. Mm-hmm.
The fact is that the South African settlers are South African settlers who identify themselves as South African. They're there. Deal with it. But that dealing with it means that there has to be a way of meeting in the middle. The current willing seller, willing buyer, or whatever it was called, it's something willing buyer, willing seller, whatever, that clearly that is not working.
No, and we cannot escape the fact that land rights are part of the whole economic situation and political.
And are also part of our apartheid history.
Exactly.
Which is why, as the ambassador stated, and as the young people said, that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission went as far as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was going to go. The intention of the commission was that the work of truth and reconciliation was going to be taken up at the local level by local peoples. And so in that kind of a process, you would have got to a land issue and a more equitable distribution of land and you can see it in the places where people have taken up the issues of land and the issues of distribution of land and have had the willingness to say, you know what, this isn't right. Yes, I own this wine farm, and I can't remember, there's a nice guy who owns a wine farm outside Cape Town, who then decided that that the way that the farm was organized under apartheid was not right, and that the workers on the farm were owed something for the centuries of
and were they given land?
And no, they were not given lands. They were given shares in the farm.
In the farm, okay.
And so that it became something that looked slightly more of a cooperative arrangement. And the thing about it is that you can say, okay, you know what, I'll give you want the land, I'll give you the land, and sukitmar out what you're going to do with it.
Yes, but land is, for example, a means of getting a loan to start a business, etc., etc.
Yes, but if you're saying, I'm taking you, here is a going concern, and now I'm saying, okay, it's yours, I'm done.
Yeah.
You figure out how to make all of this going concern work, as opposed to, you know what, let's figure out how we equitably work together on this so that we continue to reap the benefits of what is here. So all of us can actually benefit from what is here rather than it's either you or me.
I understand. I told you this could be a whole evening, but thank you for that question. Thank you. One last person with a comment or a question?
Make it a marshmallow.
Make it.
Marjolein Westerp. My question is for the two of you. How about the Rainbow Nation? What does that still mean to you?
Okay, I'm going to start with Mpho and end with the ambassador. Thank you. Rainbow Nation.
So the Rainbow Nation was the hope. That was that aspirational thing. Mandela made his invested his political capital in bringing about a sense of a single nation. And out of those 11 language groups, to create a single nation with a common history, so that people are able to identify first as South African and then whatever racial group it is that they're from, and then whatever language group it is that they're from. And that, I think, is what still holds fast and holds true about being the Rainbow Nation.
So that it worked, in your opinion, or it exists, in your opinion?
Well, rainbows are ephemeral.
They do, yes.
They, you know, it's.
They come and go.
A rainbow is a promise. A rainbow shows you the good that has been there. There has been rain and there is sun, and we have both, and it is good. And then either the moisture is gone or the sun is gone, then the rainbow is gone. And we are in a phase in our development where it's either the sun or it's the rain, but one of them has gone. And we are still striving to be nation.
Are you getting there, though? Or is there not enough moisture or sunshine?
We're only not getting there when we stop trying to get there.
Can you repeat that?
We're only not getting there when we stop trying to get there.
I think that's great words to end with. Thank you so much. Mr. Peters, your take on the Rainbow Nation? If you can top what Mpho just said, it's a challenge.
Yeah. But like the Constitution, it's important to have this ideal that you want to strive for. And we all know that that the story goes that at the end of the rainbow there's this pot of gold. Unfortunately, we will never be able to find that pot of gold. But nevertheless, the rainbow is beautiful enough to keep in our minds as something that we can maybe attain in the future.
So we have to keep that climate change in check so the moisture doesn't completely disappear. And
Sure.
there's a lot for you to do there still. So we hope you have a great time where you are and that you continue to do your good work there, Han Peters.
Surely.
Thank you for joining us from Pretoria this evening.
Thank you.
Our
Thank you.
man in Pretoria, Han Peters, and. And our special guest, Mpho Tutu van Furth. Thank you so much for telling your story. And thank you for everybody who came here this evening and gave us this feeling of, it's like a sitting room here, so that's wonderful having you here. And last but not least, thank you to the people watching from wherever you are on the globe. Join us again for another episode of Our Man In. From the Bali in Amsterdam, good night.
Night.